Hello everybody who's tuning in today to the live webinar, and hello to you if you are watching this after the event. We will start in about 1 minute's time, so go and grab yourself a cup of tea or water or coffee wherever you are in the world and just relax, and we'll be back really shortly to bring you a really interesting webinar about positive educational leadership. My name's Melissa Giorgio and this is Makke Leppänen, and we are going to be talking all things positive leadership in the next minute or so. So welcome, thank you for being here. Is that working now? Just waiting for a few more people to come in. So hello and welcome if you're just tuning in now to this live webinar from Eduten, and the topic of today's webinar is positive educational leadership, and I have our special guest here, Makke Leppänen, and we're really excited to start talking to you about this topic, and we'll get started in just a minute. So as I said before, take a seat, relax, just take the next 30 to 40 minutes to sit back and absorb what you're about to hear and see. And as usual, whatever is going on, just try to get yourself into a space where you can think about what would be a takeaway from this talk that you can apply straight away into your working life, whether you are a current educational leader or whether you are a teacher. That's still included in educational leadership because, of course, as a teacher, you are an educational leader. And you might just be watching because you're interested in this topic and you might be studying this topic at the moment. So welcome to everybody, and all of you will be able to get something out of this talk. We're really happy to have you here. Yeah, of course. Okay. Well, we're right on time, so we'll just get started. Hello and welcome everybody. For the third time now, if you're just joining us, you've tuned in to Eduten's webinar all about positive educational leadership. Welcome, my name is Melissa Giorgio and I work at Eduten, and today we have our guest Makke Leppänen, who is going to talk to us all about positive educational leadership because he is an absolute expert in the field. I'll talk to you just in a moment, Makke, so I know you're excited to get started. For the next 30 to 40 minutes, say, we're going to be talking about this topic. But before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. So those of you who are a part of the Positive Educational Leadership course, welcome and hello. We're really happy to have you here, and I'd like to honour the fact that you've come this far in the course and you're here for our final closing ceremony. So if that's you, please submit your questions if you have any. This is your opportunity to speak to us live. We've got Dimitri in the background and he is sending us all of the questions, and we're really happy to field those in the next 30 minutes. So if there's anything that's hot on your heart, please send it. And for those of you who are joining in because you were invited to this webinar because you're interested in the topic, we thought, why not open this up? We've got the Positive Educational Leadership course participants here. Thank you for being here. But we've also got people who are interested in this topic in general and not wanting to pass up the opportunity to hear Makke Leppänen live, who is a real expert in this field. So we'll get started. Hello, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Makke, before we get started, I'd like you to talk a little bit about your professional and academic background, because first of all, I also have a master's degree in educational leadership. And in fact, my main thesis was about positive educational leadership. So it's something I'm really excited about. But Makke, you also have an academic background and professional background in this area. Can you take us through that? Like, what have you done in your past and present?
Yes, maybe before we go to the academic background, I want to talk about the practical stuff.
Oh, okay, for sure.
I have 25 years background of leading people and managing people. And that's maybe the best school and education for me to lead people in practice. But I also have a coaching psychology background. So I pursued my master's studies at the University of Sydney, Australia, 15 years ago. And my main topic was positive and coaching psychology. Those two topics that are
really interesting background. So could you give us a really quick 2-sentence definition of positive psychology, because that's something that people might not have heard about. Our participants in the Positive Educational Leadership course have read all about it, but in a nutshell, what is positive psychology?
Maybe the main definition is that, or background is that psychology started to focus on weaknesses, failures, and also problems, mental problems of people, and started to research that. And then 15 years ago, people or researchers realized that we also need to focus on the positive side of things and strength and also learning from those kind of things and that positive side. And
so it's kind of steering the psychology into what's working and what's going well, and
exactly
and learning from that. So we're not discounting things that don't go well in the workplace or in life. We're still including that stuff, the negative stuff, but we're also coming at it from a different angle.
I think we definitely need both. We still have a lot of mental challenges, and those people who has mental challenges, they need help as well. But we also need this positive side, that things that work really well, let's learn from them. And also those people who have mental challenges might learn from things and people who function really well and who are happy and who have good well-being.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And is it true that you've also been a sports coach? Because we're going to talk a little bit about a sports theme today as well. Tell us about that, your coaching background.
I started my career as a professional baseball coach and did that almost 10 years. And that was a really good also opportunity for me to learn about leading teams and also just leading and managing people in general.
And because I don't know if any of you are sports people, but I know from my interaction with sports people that sports is life, So a lot of the time people in sport relate everything in life to sport. And I think maybe you wouldn't be so different because you have this sporting coaching background as well. Oh, so much. Okay, so we've got a psychologist here. We've got a person who has led people and is leading people, and somebody who has a background in entrepreneurship as well. So lots of different angles that you're coming from. So we're so grateful that you're here today sharing your expertise. This is a real treat for us at Eduten and for the viewers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, but it's not only me. You have also really good background of positive educational leadership. So it's a good combination.
So you're already being so positive and acknowledging the good that's happening here right now. I'm just checking my phone here to see whether Dimitri has sent me any questions. So don't forget, if you're live here now and you have any pressing questions about positive leadership, let's just keep it down to that theme. Please type it in the chat and I will hear about them and ask Makke. So basically, I just wanted to say with our positive education course from Eduten, the feedback we've had so far from we've had 200 people sign up to do this course, and so far tens of people, almost 100 people have actually graduated the course, and I hope that you're watching this video now as well so you can get your certificate. But the feedback that we got so far from that course was the segment that we did with you, Market, because people actually were asking for more from you. And in that segment, when I interviewed you, one of the things that I think really resonated with people was we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So as a leader, we have to practice our listening skills and how important it is to be a good listener, to really understand what's happening in the workplace. So today we're taking it a little bit further, and you're going to give everybody a few new tips as a leader and then as a positive leader, and then you can apply this to any field, education, IT, whichever field you're in. But you're going to talk today about this coaching approach.
Yes.
So when I hear the words coaching approach, I think, aha, here we go, sport, sport, sport. And what if we're not really sporty, you know? So tell us, in a coaching approach, just overall, what does that mean?
I think there are many definitions for coaching approach, but for me, the main thing is that we try to help people to grow. So it's like the same as it is in sport. You coach people in sport and you try to help them to become better. And in coaching approach in workplaces and in education institutions and that environment, it's the same. We want people to become better, get out of all their potential, and just grow.
It's such a nice way to approach things, because if I were one of your team members and I knew that somebody, because when I think about a coach, I think of somebody that's cheering me on from the side, giving me good feedback, but also saying, good job, you know, is that the sort of approach that you're advocating?
Yeah, of course, focusing on people's strength and what works well, and emphasizing those that they will continue and they realize that those are my strength and those are the things that I need to use at my work in order to be happy and do well.
So if you are an educational leader, whether it be a school leader, a teacher, or you're a leader of a different organisation, that would be the first thing, maybe to even think of yourself in that persona, like as a coach. So what could you do with that, being a coach? If you were a coach, what would you embody? So give us the first tip, Marke.
I would say that one really cool tool is to...
Cool
yes. Tool, actually, that's a good term. Yeah, to share our success. So when you have a weekly meeting or monthly meeting, just have a dialogue around where people share their success. And that really, of course, increase people's confidence because they can talk about their success. So just simple thing. What did I well? What did I well when I was leading people? What I did well with my students, and those kind of things. And it creates really nice team spirit as well and atmosphere. So that's the first tool. Just have a round, talk about your last week success and where you did really well or where you managed to do well.
And in positive psychology, I think that's called the What Went Well exercise,
Yes.
WWW.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, easy thing to remember and easy thing to do. And who doesn't like to celebrate good things that have happened? So, yeah, what went well?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay.
But having said that, we need to focus on what went well. Also, it's good to share about our mistakes. One really good way to learn, what I always say and share and try to help people to talk about as well, is to talk about their mistakes. That's one of the best way to learn. So learning by doing mistakes. It's same when, for example, Eduten, in Eduten platform, kids are doing and students are doing their exercises. They do mistakes there all the time, and then they have opportunity to learn from that and do it again. That's what I also encourage. So when you have those weekly meetings, talk about your mistakes as well. What went well, but also what didn't well that didn't do that or didn't go that well, and what you learned from that.
I think as adults, it's a really difficult thing to learn to be open about our mistakes, because if you're our age, you've been taught your whole life to quickly cover up mistakes, or even worse, don't make them in the first place. So that would take a lot of long-term practice. But I guess what you're saying is, as a leader, you could lead the way with that and share the mistakes that maybe you've made to help others become more comfortable sharing their mistakes.
I have done a lot of executive coaching, and for all kind of leaders, it's really difficult to share their mistakes if you are not used to. So that's what I always try to encourage them. Just open yourself and start to talk about your mistakes. It's nothing bad, but it's really deep in our DNA that, and also in our mindset, that we are not really comfortable to talk about our mistakes. But that's the thing. You need to be, as a leader, a good example of talking about your mistakes.
Yes. And I guess when you talk about mistakes, that also creates more closeness between you and the people that you share them with. Yeah. So I'm drawing a connection between doing that in the workplace or doing that in your home with the people that you live or love. So live with or love. So as a parent, it's also a good idea to share those things with your child. Okay. Would you like to keep going? So we've got learning from mistakes. Have you covered all of the aspects of learning from mistakes?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing that we think about with a coaching approach is to acknowledge what's gone well and then acknowledge the mistakes we've made. Now, I've got a question actually to do with mistakes. Do we talk about mistakes straight away? So what if something happens in the workplace that isn't good, like that's lost money for the company or created a disturbance of some sort? Do we talk about it straight away? Do we haul that person into the office and say, how could you have been so stupid? You know, what happened or whatever? Can you tell me a little bit more about how to approach mistakes? Like if somebody on your team makes a mistake?
I think, of course, it depends on the situation and the context, but it depends on the case. It's really different to talk about if some, like I have lost a lot of money or make a mistake that the company has lost a lot of money, comparing that you do something really small. So, but if you do something big mistake, of course, the important thing is to do it have a discussion one-to-one, and just admit that we all do mistake and create that positive sort of environment and spirit that's easy to talk about, because the other people is really ashamed and embarrassed. So it's better to have a one-to-one discussion when it's a really big mistake and we are talking about even, for example, losing a lot of money. But if you're talking about small things that, for example, a teacher was teaching and then he was teaching in a wrong way or something, if there is something like that, then you can talk about in a team meeting about that. But it's important that you don't start to talk about someone else's mistakes. Everybody will share their own mistakes, and don't be too pushy. It's not easy to start to talk about mistakes straight away. So, as I said, it's in our DNA that we don't really want to share them.
Right. So just on that, before we get to point number 2, and it's actually quite connected to this. But when you're about to share, if you're a leader and somebody has made a mistake, because this is the stuff actually that when leadership really shows its true colours, should you warn the person that you're about to give them some difficult feedback that might be difficult to hear, or should you just go straight in and say, right, we've got to talk about this? Like, how could you, in practical terms, talk? Like, if we were having a discussion now and I was the worker and I have had a complaint from a parent, for instance, who wasn't happy with something I did in the classroom, and you were the school principal, how could we talk about it? You've called me into your office, we're right here. What would you say to me?
Let's talk about that a little bit later. Now you are talking about constructive feedback. Okay. Let's talk about that later. But something that I would like to mention here is we also need to remember that cultures are different. For example, here in Finland, 30 years ago or 40 years ago, we started to manufacture phones. I don't know if you remember, but we were really famous here in Finland about Nokia phones. And in order to create, for example, that whole business field of manufacturing phones, it needed a lot of mistakes. So we needed to 30 years ago to create that whole culture for Finland, that experimental culture, that you try different things and then you learn from your mistakes. And because technology developed really fast, so you needed to do mistakes really fast in order to find the right way to, for example, develop excellent phones. And then, Apple came, iPhone came, and they created even better thing, and they created new way of developing stuff. But that's important to notice that not all cultures are in the same states at the moment. That might be that somewhere, I, for example, notice in some countries it's not sort of allowed to share your mistakes, and you need to go slowly.
Yeah,
don't expect that people are able to share your mistakes right away.
Okay, all right. Well, let's get back to that scenario, and we could maybe do a little bit of a role play about that. So what about point number 2? So you shared point number 1, learning from mistakes. What's the point number 2 in the coaching
So
approach?
when we are talking about coaching and coaching approach, one of the main elements is asking questions, learning to ask really good questions. And this is same with students and with kids. We all know who has own kids that the good way to help them to grow is to ask questions instead of always giving a straight answer. So when you ask questions, the person needs to need to think about the answer by themselves. For example, if someone asks, "What should I do?" So the good question is, "What about how do you think by yourself?
What do you think
what you should do?" So questioning is really important part of positive leadership and also coaching approach.
And the good thing about questioning, and I noticed this with my own child at home, when you question somebody, it gives them the space to actually think. So you're really embracing this higher order thinking rather than just being told something and then repeating it. Okay.
I think it's really important for kids to learn to reflect.
Yes.
We are coming, again, if you're looking at 40 years back, we were in that culture. We are talking about behaviorist model of learning where there were all the right answers and kids needed to learn the right answers. But world is quite different nowadays. So the main thing for teachers and leaders is not to give the straight answer, to learn to find good questions, and for students and employees as well that you lead, the main thing is to start to contemplate, think by themselves, and learn to use your own brain. We all have really great potential for thinking, but sometimes we get lazy if you don't need to use your brain.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so how can we ask these good questions? Do you have some advice?
So there are a couple of good rules to remember. One thing is that try to avoid asking that kind of questions what lead to yes or no answer. So those are called closed questions, where the other person just answer yes or no. So, are you happy now?
Yes.
So you just give a quick answer, but you don't need to really contemplate.
How could you restructure that question?
Yeah.
What makes you happy?
Yeah, what makes you happy, for example, or how do you feel now, and why do you feel like that?
Yes.
And how would you feel better?
Yep.
So,
really good example.
So how question is really effective. So try to use those how questions.
Okay, so how questions, right.
Also what kind of, or what other options.
Yeah.
So if someone is asking, how should I develop this thing? You can say, what do you think about by yourself? What kind of possibilities or what kind of options do you have to develop?
So you're talking about if a staff member comes to you as a leader and says, "Oh, what should I do?" You're saying turn that question around on them and say, well, that's a great idea.
Yeah, but not always. If there is a really clear answer,
of course.
What for example, what time do we need to start this lesson? You cannot say, what do you feel like?
That would be every child's dream.
Yeah, because that also annoys people if there is a like a right answer,
Right.
correct answer, then you need to give that. But
That's
when we are
right.
talking about that, developing something or doing things differently
Yeah.
or try to find new options or new ideas.
Because we need to be discerning as leaders, and it's the same with parenting. At the end of the day, you are in that position because you've earned it and you've got the expertise in that position. So don't just rest back and let everybody else run the show. But then at the same time, there's that gentle push and pull between good leadership and active leadership and passive leadership, I guess you could say. Okay, so that's very good. Anything else you'd like to say about asking good questions?
No, I think that's pretty much the thing. To remember that ask open questions where the answer is also open. So it means how questions, what kind of options, how could we do this differently?
Yeah.
Those kind of questions, and not those closed questions where the other person can answer yes or no.
Yeah, and just asking questions, in itself.
Yeah, and try to think about what kind
Yeah.
of questions are effective.
Yeah.
So just write them down and start to use them.
Yeah, have them in your drawer.
Yeah.
And just get them out and use them. Okay,
Yeah.
really good. So much value in what you're bringing today. Thank you, Marke. And just in case you're tuning in now, you're here watching this webinar about positive education leadership. And Marke Leppänen, who is a psychologist, leadership coach, and all of these wonderful things, is talking about this coaching approach. And he's outlined, number one, as a coach leader, to learn from your mistakes, and number two, learn to ask good questions. And this webinar is brought to you by Eduten, and we have our participants from our Positive Educational Leadership course. Welcome to all of you. We're really happy that you're here. Thank you for being here. And we have people who are watching the webinar who are interested in this topic. So don't forget, if you want any more information about Eduten itself, which is a math learning platform available everywhere in the world, please go to www.eduten.com and find out more. We will also have links to how to get Eduten in your classroom below the video. So please click and come and talk to us and let us set you up with Eduten. Okay, so we've had the first two tips and we've got one more tip to take us through to the end of this webinar. Number 3, how to give... I nearly
made a mistake.
I nearly revealed the last tip. Silly me. So, Marke, do you have one more tip that you'd like to share?
Yes, I have one more tip, but I'll wait a little bit longer. So, do we have any questions?
No, we don't have any questions.
Okay,
so just keep going.
I will go to the third point and third tip.
Yes.
And that's constructive feedback. So we started to talk about strength as a part of important element of positive psychology and coaching psychology. But one important thing is that we need to know this as well: constructive feedback. Of course, there is a sort of rule about feedback, and it's based on positive psychology research. The rule is that you need to give 3 times more positive feedback comparing to constructive feedback or negative feedback. I like to call it constructive, because negative, I don't know is the right word. But,
can I just interrupt and say that our course participants would have read about that, and it's that Lasada ratio from memory, and it's 3 to 1.
Yeah, it's 3 to 1.
Might even be 5 to 1.
Yeah, in some points here 5 to 1.
Okay, but average is 3 to 1. Yeah,
it's important to notice that it's not 3 or 5 to 0. So there is 1, and that means that constructive feedback is really important.
Yeah.
Constructive feedback means something that you need to develop, something that didn't go that well or hasn't gone that well lately. So constructive feedback is really important way of learning. As we already talk about my sport background, especially in sport, for example, if you don't give constructive feedback to athletes, they just cannot really grow and develop their skills. But also for students, for teachers, for all leaders, and for everybody, it's really important that we are able to give constructive feedback for each other. That's the way to go, and that's the way to learn and grow.
Okay, so let's circle back to that example that I was trying to elicit from you a few minutes ago, and that was, if you're a school principal and you've called me into your office for doing something that requires constructive feedback, how do you go about it? Do you just start yelling at me?
That's a good point to start with telling. So it's important. As a psychologist, I always try to explain to people that tone of voice is really important because we all have emotions, and if there is not right atmosphere when we are talking to each other and having a dialogue, the other one just feel your emotions and they just hear your tone of voice. So that's why if you start to yell, they don't hear what you try to say. They only feel that you are angry and you have negative emotions.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really important to be calm by yourself when you want to give constructive feedback. The other important tip is how do you sort of create the space for the other person. For example, when you come to my office and I want to give some constructive feedback for you, I would say, Melissa, I would like to give you some constructive feedback. And then I'm silent for a while and give to the other person to sort of space to calm down and also prepare for the feedback and also a little bit contemplate. So preparation for hearing the feedback is really important. And as a leader or teacher, if you want to give feedback to constructive feedback to the other person, you need to prepare them for that.
That's really good advice, because there's nothing worse than walking into a lion's den, whether it's the office of your leader, and I've had that experience before as a teacher when I've been called to the principal's office, or whether you're a student being called to being disciplined by your teacher or your principal. So to sort of let people know that what's coming up is a little bit possibly uncomfortable and it might be challenging to hear, so brace yourself, be ready for it. Okay, that's really good advice. So tone of voice matters. What else?
The other person might get really defensive and they might try to start to yell at you or try to get sad, and so there will be emotions. Depends on how big is the thing. So you need to try to be mindful. Now we are coming back to the mindful listening part. So you need to try
2 ears, one mouth.
You need to be also able to hear what the other one will want to say, and that's important. And you need to try to stay calm, because if the other person start to yell at you, you might get defensive as well and start to yell back, and then neither of you will hear anything.
That's right.
So then it's just yelling or blaming. Normally what happens, we all know who are in relationship what happens at home sometimes. We just start to blame to each other instead of trying to have this constructive dialogue and learn from each other.
Okay, that's great advice as well. How to give constructive feedback. Think about your tone of voice. So it's always about checking in with yourself first, and then prepare the person that you're about to give the feedback to. And then what was the other thing? Mindful listening.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mindful listening. And then one more sort of rule or tip is that try to talk about facts when you give constructive feedback. Try to avoid saying that you have heard some rumors and someone said somewhere something.
The worst.
Yes. So you need to prepare also that even write down all sentences what you wanna say, and they need to be based on facts.
Yeah, that's a great tip actually. Writing down, preparing. Because, we prepare for other things in work, so why not prepare to have a healthy discussion with one of our colleagues or workers? Mike, we have a couple of questions actually.
Excellent. Yay. I'm excited.
That's exciting. Okay, so thank you for being here, Ahmed. And you've asked, how to convince school management to adapt positive leadership inside all classes. Okay, so I'm guessing that Ahmed is coming from an angle where he might not be the school leader and he wants to introduce or suggest positive leadership at his school. So that's a really good question. How to convince school management to adapt positive leadership inside all classes? Well, I'll give you a tip, Ahmed. Direct them to this positive educational leadership course and this video. Maybe that would be a good start. But Market, do you have any ideas about that? Like how can, because often this is the case, isn't it? That maybe leaders, well, I'm talking from my own experience, sometimes leaders have gotten into that position because of their status or because of their length of service, and not necessarily because of their research background or their willingness to adopt new types of leadership. So, you know, this is a thing. I'm sure we've got a lot of people who work in the education field who are really wanting to step forward and do something different. So how can they suggest those things? Starting small, I guess.
That's a really good question. And I would say, as every time you want to sell something new, you want to convince other people, the why question is really important. So why would we do this? Why do we want to do this? And if you want to give presentation, you need to, your first slide needs to be, why would we do this in our school? Why would we like to change this thing? And the why, for the why question, answer I think should come from academic point of view. So we have a lot of research in positive psychology, in organizational psychology, that positive educational leadership works. In schools, teachers are happier, they feel better, like their well-being is better, and therefore it influences on the students' results and academic learning as well. So I would start with that, convincing them with different research.
Yeah. And everybody loves the research, because if something's scientifically backed, well, you can't really go against it.
Yeah.
It just reminded me actually of when I was introducing mindfulness as a part of our classroom curriculum at my last school. And something that's new is often really difficult for people to swallow at first. So the way I did it was just to go about it in tiny, almost imperceptible ways, so you can't really see that it's happening. But in a meeting, you might introduce a short listening exercise, for instance, or in a meeting, you might just bring up, oh, I read this thing the other day, or I watched this webinar about positive education leadership. What does everybody think about that? Or what does that mean to you? So I guess the answer is little things.
Yeah.
And not going full force at once. But yeah, I understand, Ahmed, that's a very tricky situation, actually, to be in a position where you want to start something new and you might not feel supported by school management. But also I'm making an assumption that you are in a classroom, but also your classroom is like your little world. And even within that little world, you can make change and be that change. So you do have an influence in whether your management takes that on or not. We've got another question, a few actually. We're going to have to start, and this is good timing, because you've gone through these three main parts of the coaching approach, which are learning from mistakes, asking good questions, and giving constructive feedback in a constructive way. So a question from Kit1 in Malaysia. Thank you for being here, Kit. How should an employee brace him or her? How should an employee brace themselves to face an autocratic leader who doesn't allow feedback? Yes, we know this happens. Or one that keeps condemning his employees. Okay, so, you know, on the ground, these are real questions coming from people. How does an employee get ready to face a difficult leader who doesn't allow feedback and keeps condemning employees? That's really tricky. So an employee might feel very sort of, I don't know, overwhelmed by their leader and don't feel like it's a fair place to be.
What comes to my mind first is the just protect yourself. That because sometimes what happened in those kind of cases is that you sort of lose yourself, you lose your confidence, and it really influences on you. You try to give feedback on wanna improve and develop things, but there is no anything that any feedback that someone is on your side or your
Yeah.
leader is on your side. So one thing is, don't take that personally. You can just try to do for some point, but if the other one doesn't listen to you, it's not your fault. And sometimes it's like you
Yeah.
cannot do anything.
Sometimes it isn't.
Yeah.
Yes. So learn to or practice not taking things
Yeah.
personally. Yeah, for sure. Very hard to do in an autocratic workplace. And then I guess it's also the change just has to start with yourself.
Yes.
So just keep doing what you think is okay and kind of block out the rest. I mean, these are really difficult and usual things that happen in workplaces. So yeah, we understand these questions. But
And sometimes I would continue. Sometimes it's better if it's too difficult, if it influences too much on your life. Also, that start to think about changing the workplace.
yeah,
Like put to the universum that you wanna find better, more creative, more positive environment to work, and you will see that you will find better school.
That's great advice, and that's true, because sometimes actually you can't change the situation or whatever. So the best is to again look at yourself and then decide where you want to relocate, or if you want to, or put it out there, and you never know what's going to happen. Another really good question from Noriska. Thank you for being here, Noriska. I hope I've said your name correctly. Learning mistakes is important, they share. It helps guide you about what you should do. Very true. But for parents in schools, not parents in the home, but parents of your students at school, sometimes it's difficult. Can you give tips about how to communicate this way of thinking with parents? Great question. Because that's the thing. At the end of the day, often we have the stress of the parents wanting their students to get the good results and not make mistakes, etc. Over to you.
I would say that you are better expert to answer this. You have been in a classroom for 15 years,
Yes.
and you know this case really well from Australian schools.
Yes.
Or
I have been in the classroom for 15 years, and of course I was teaching at a school that had very, very high standards, mostly from parents. And I think that the best advice I could give is to communicate with your parents about how you deal with mistakes in the classroom. So that's number one. So you need to create that culture within your community, and the results really will speak for themselves. You might get pushback at first, but the best and most critical and practical advice I could give would be to be write a letter home, write a note home, and introduce yourself and introduce your philosophy about making mistakes and why you do it. The reason that we have to make mistakes in the classroom is to grow. The only way that we can get better at anything is to try different things and keep going. And that's the most crucial part, to keep going, because it's really easy after making a mistake to just give up, and then the learning stops. So when you explain to parents how that works and throw in a few studies or scientific background from it to really bring it home. But parents also just need to understand that we grow from making mistakes. And that reminds me, with Eduten math platform, for instance, it's a really good example of how when we make mistakes when we're doing the math on the platform, it's no big deal. We look at the mistake, we go in and correct the mistake. We don't say, I made a mistake, that's the end of it. We have to correct the mistake, we have to fix it, but it's the attitude we have on the path to fixing it. So I would say, again, you have to be the example of doing that. And I understand parents can often be very difficult and you get a lot of pressure from parents, but this sort of thing is the only way to allow students to grow and actually achieve well, if they understand when mistakes are made and then are able to bounce back from those mistakes without feeling ashamed. So would you add anything to that?
No, that was comprehensive answer. That was really good, excellent answer.
Okay, and we
Coming
need to,
from also your experience, not
Yeah.
only from research. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate that
But
answer.
thank you for that question, Narissa. We've got one more question, and I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up because it's we're over 40 minutes in. But it's a question from Petha Puramal. Is it okay? Oh, okay. This is interesting. Is it okay for a leader to talk about a mistake or problem done by a particular person in a general meeting? I think you spoke about this before. Or should it be discussed in private? A really good question. So is it okay for a leader to talk about a mistake or problem in a general meeting, or should it be discussed in private?
It's a really good question, thanks. I would say that no, you cannot talk about other people's mistakes. They need to bring them up by themselves. They need to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about the mistake, you need to have a private discussion.
Yeah.
But I cannot start to talk about your mistake in front of other teachers or in front of my team.
Yeah, I think I would just go into defense mode if somebody tried to do that to me in a meeting. So yes, definitely go the private route and discuss it with them first, and then maybe later with their permission.
Yes.
You might be able to discuss it.
That's a good point. You need to have the permission.
Yeah, so you might be able to discuss it in a general way. Okay, so I think that really we should wrap this up. I'll keep this open just in case something crucial comes through. But for those of you who have completed the Positive Educational Leadership course with Eduten, thank you very much, and thank you so much for being here. And those of you who are tuning in and are interested in positive leadership, fantastic that you're here, and we hope that you got something out of this. Those of you who are in the course, we'd also like to invite you to trial Eduten in your school. We offer, actually for everybody who's here, we offer Eduten, which is Finland's #1 math learning platform. We offer that 4-week trial, absolutely free, in your classroom. Here, our experts from Finland train your teachers on how to use the platform. It's a gamified math platform, so children are practicing their maths at the same time as having fun, basically. And for teachers, it's a fabulous tool because you don't have to mark the work. The artificial intelligence marks the work for you and just sends you the results. And at the click of a button, you can see where your students are at. So Eduten platform is a positive learning experience, and that's actually our mission, isn't it, at Eduten, to make learning positive. Because if we're not learning in a positive way or having positive experiences when we're doing something, we don't have the want or impetus to grow. So please contact us. Contact me personally, melissa@eduten.com, and I'll put you in touch with the right person if you would like a free 4-week trial of Eduten platform in your classroom. I think that is pretty much all for today. Makke Leppänen, it's been absolutely wonderful to have you here today. You're one of Finland's foremost experts in positive psychology. Actually, you're probably one of the founding experts in Finland in positive psychology. So it's a real treat to have you here today. Thank you for being here, and thanks for sharing this coaching approach with our audience, learning from mistakes, asking good questions, and giving constructive feedback. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. That was my privilege to be here today. Talk about these important issues about leadership. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for our audience. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you.